Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, another day of the calendar turns. We are now in the middle of July, and we are creeping up ever so much closer to training camp.
Yeah, it was a busy 4th of July weekend for the both of us. We had to unfortunately take a week off. We didn't want to or expect to, I would say, going into it. But hopefully everyone had a good 4th weekend out there celebrating 250 or doing whatever the heck you do on that wonderful long weekends. But we are now entering mid-July, and it feels great because I do feel like the 4th of July, and the reason I bring that up is kind of that book turn, that turning of the page, that all of a sudden it then becomes real that football's around the corner. I think once you get through the 4th of July weekend, which is, in my opinion, kind of like the peak of summer, whether you're in school in summer, you're off for the summer, or you work in a school system and you're off for the summer, and or you're in the working class ways where summer might be relaxed and you take off around that time. Once you get through that weekend, around the corner, you get back into a rhythm with your work. You start to realize that school's around the corner, and then with school comes football. People are starting to have that conversation with Josh Allen, on podcasts or whatever, and other NFL players. And the reality is setting in that, hey, within a couple weeks, people are reporting back to camp. In 3 weeks, we're probably looking at preseason football, depending on your team, so on and so forth. That it's exciting times as we kind of wrap up the offseason of no more football or current football to discuss.
Yeah, I had the thought this weekend that, in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be time to get ready for fantasy football drafts. You got to get back in the mode of that. So getting us on the topic of getting back into football, Luke and I are going to continue with our rival series on this episode, breaking down the AFC West. But before we get there, Luca, we had some drama in Bills land this week, and you and I wanted to touch on it. It has to do with the PSL season ticket holders and what the Bills announced with relation to the red and blue scrimmage, where PSL would be an exclusive event for PSL holders. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I think the Bills caught wind of that and then realized, okay, we need to make something available to non-PSL holders to have a chance to get into. So then they announced they're going to have another open practice that's going to be available to everybody, kind of first come, first serve. And some PSL holders, especially some loser that called in the WGR, that decided to, name call people that don't have PSLs, took exception to that. And where do you come down on this, Luca? Because I understand if you bought a PSL, you might feel a certain entitlement to that seat, but I also feel like maybe you don't fully understand what the PSL entitles you to. It is literally first come, first serve, Buffalo Bills football games. It is not your seat that you own for every event that goes on in that stadium.
Yeah, it does have some additional event stuff to it. I love that people instantly in the know kind of made sure they highlighted within the contract that any individual that agreed to a PSL, paid for a PSL, so on and so forth. It essentially states, and I don't have the verbatim in front of me, but it's, essentially telling you that at the discretion of the stadium and the stadium ownership, at any point there could be an event there where you don't have priority due to your PSL. And for that right there to be built into the contract of which any individual signed it, for you to then be entitled to a level that feels upset with not a regular season game that is being taken away from you, not even a preseason game that's being taken away from you, or any, let's call it, high profile concert, for instance, that's being taken away from you. It is a open practice in the middle to late stretch of August that has been included last second or off the cuff or whatever you want to call it, that they realized, hey, there are going to be plenty of individuals in this area that don't have the opportunity to get into the stadium because they've unfortunately been priced out. And we, as an organization being the Bills, have the ability to open up another window of time for potential people that don't have that PSL access and don't have the exclusive rights for their seasons and all that access that comes with it, to then come into the stadium and enjoy this new thing, this new feature that the team they love and support in this area has for them going into this year and years to come. And I think first and foremost, thumbs up to the Bills organization and things like that to come up with something like that. So last second, they didn't need to do something like that. The Bills did not need to alter their offseason schedule, introduce another open practice, which comes with it a lot of eyes, a lot of distraction for the players. I mean, Josh Allen's going to be getting yelled at by a bunch of fans once again, which always happens in the red and blue scrimmage, so on and so forth. Like, all of these things are going to be happening for them. That is going to take away from a valuable practice session, but it is them nodding to the fans and nodding to individuals that don't have the ability and don't have the access that they would like, for their own reasons, for whatever reasons, that you can at least enjoy a little piece of this for now in a small little thing that is, in my opinion, very secondary to anything that a PSL owner should even remotely be upset about. I found it very odd, the level of entitlement some individuals had with it. And overall, it's like, yes, you did pay whatever X dollar amount for the right and access to your seat in your section in that spot of the stadium. I get it. But if the Bills and Highmark covered their bases enough to put that legality, the legal writing in it, and have it be like, hey, we can do open things in this stadium too, just so you are aware, you already lose all basis of your argument to be upset. And then two, it's not anything of meaning. It is, we're talking about an open practice. So even if that, text didn't exist, even if you were supposed to have the right to get bent out of shape about an open practice, to me, at its core, the morals of it just make no sense. It's if I were in that position and I spent $10,000 for this PSL and the rights to this seat or these seats in that stadium for all the regular season games. I mean, I'm also very open with my preseason take alone. I wouldn't have batted an eye and been like, that makes a lot of sense, because there's people that couldn't afford to do such a thing that want to have at least some experience in that stadium right now, because every regular season game at this moment in time, I believe, is at least a minimum cost of $380 to $400 a ticket. And that is over double the cost of minimum tickets last year. And the reality of it all is that a lot of people that were able to potentially scoop up tickets late to games the previous seasons and so on and so forth, you'd see them even in the winter months, fall as kickoff approaches, stuff like that. It's just not going to be possible this year, and maybe even for the next year or two, that to get into the stadium for a meaningful game, for a meaningful moment. And this is realistically the only opportunity they'll even be able to get hands-on, eyes-on experience of that stadium. And as someone that has seen it up close and personal from inside and out, it's one of those things where I want as many people to experience it, because it is very different than anything anyone from here has experienced, in my opinion. And it's very exciting. And I'll be also transparent. I will not be stepping foot in that as soon as live action football happens. I just can't grasp the concept of paying the amount of money you have to be in that stadium at this moment in time. But I'm happy that some other people had disposable income to do so and will be continuing to go to all those games. Congrats to you. It's just for an open practice to get bent out of shape about it last and most. Just move on with your life. I don't. What are we doing here? Getting bent out of shape about it, arguing with people on Twitter about it, calling into WGR about it, calling people poverty, and just like, it just, that is way over the top of what you need to be doing when it comes to this situation. You can be upset about it individually, but to make it someone else's problem, to me, is even just a step too far. It's like, just move on with your life, man. It will not be the end all be all. And guess what? Once preseason game one comes around, once week one or week two, the first game in that stadium against the Lions comes around, you will be sitting in your seat experiencing that moment, and no one else will be. And that's what you paid for. That's what you're doing this for.
Yeah. And this idea that there's a line in the sand of, like some upper class, middle class, where only the upper class folks have PSLs is just wrong. It's all about money management. There's going to be plenty of rich folks out there, the upper class folks that decide it wasn't worth their money. They have other things they want to do with their money. There could be people in there that are not as well off, but they are just so diehard about being in there every Sunday for Bills football that they don't care what percentage of their income it costs. They're going to be there, and that is their choice.
Yeah.
Ultimately, to Luka's point, Josh Allen could open up that open practice with a deep 70-yard pass to DJ Moore. That'll be a fantastic memory for you. Preseason game 1, you could see Josh Allen hit a wide open Keon Coleman for a touchdown. That'll be a fantastic memory for you. But the second the Lions come to town, we're going to forget everything that happened in the open practice and in preseason. And it's going to be all about what happens on the field that day. And the Bills could lose 30-0, or Josh Allen could go out there and throw 6 touchdowns. But it'll be those folks that really had like the first memory. And then ultimately in situations like this, Luka, I like to go to people who are much smarter than me. So I'm going to quote the great thinker, Allen Iverson. We're sitting here talking about practice. I mean, listen, we're talking about practice, not a game. We're talking about practice. You know, sometimes Iverson is just ahead of the rest of us.
Well said.
All right. Well, on that note, let's get to the AFC West, because this division is fascinating for a number of reasons. One, they have the boogeyman, the Chiefs, who have been in the Bills' way 4 times now. And it really does feel like when you're watching any random Bills season play out, it's almost like, yes, we know there are 16 teams in the AFC West, but how are the Bills and Chiefs doing? Which one's ahead of who? Well, will that playoff game that seems inevitable be at Orchard Park, or will it be in Kansas City? And last year, the Chiefs missed the playoffs, but ironically enough, it was another AFC West team that eliminated the Bills in Denver, and they're getting a lot of credit for what their roster looks like this year. Chargers also getting a lot of credit for what their roster looks like this year, and the Raiders overhauled their coaching staff, had the number 1 pick, drafted Fernando Mendoza. And what is it all going to amount to? We are about to find out. Luka, let's start in a place that's very familiar for Bills fans. Let's start in Kansas City. A down year last year. And I do think maybe for off-season purposes, and you would never say this, like there's no Chiefs fan that's happy that Patrick Mahomes got injured last year. That would be silly. But I think for off-season talking point purposes, the injury serves as a great excuse. Like, well, the Chiefs didn't make the playoffs. Mahomes' numbers were down, but he was hurt. Like, you can't even really count that as a real season. No. He got hurt in December. He missed the last couple games. The game he got hurt in, he left and they were trailing. And had they lost that game, even with him playing, they would have been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs that day. So they were a Mahomes comeback and winning streak away from making the playoffs, which seemed very unlikely for how their season turned out. I think you started to see some flaws in this team. You started to see their defense, show some warts. They struggled against some high volume offense. Then they turned over their entire secondary this offseason. They brought back a familiar face in Eric Bieniemy, finally realizing that Matt Nagy was not the answer. We could have told you that 3 years ago, but whatever. They brought back Travis Kelce. The Chiefs really are kind of, now they have a habit of letting secondary members go before they hit that big contract. They did it with Snead, and then they did it this offseason with 2 of their guys in the secondary, ironically bringing back Snead. They did bring in the Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker, which I don't think is any small add. He is going to be definitively the best running back the Chiefs have had, in my opinion, since young Kareem Hunt prior to all the legal issues. And that's going to give them a dynamic 2-way offense that should help make up for what I still think is a lack of weapons on the outside. The only true high-end receiver I think they have is Rashee Rice. I do think Xavier Worthy is more of a fun toy than some receiver you can count on an every down basis. And Travis Kelce at this point is a good but not great tight end. When you look at this Chiefs team, Luka, do you see 2025 as a blip on the radar or more of a sign of things to come?
I mean, I'll start the answer with neither, but if I had to lean, I would say it's more of a trend than a blip. Why I say neither, though, is the overall first answer is just because I think last year felt as if there were even, there were forces going against them where it was almost as if it was a collection of all the luck from years prior, finally just biting them in the ass one week after another. I mean, the year prior, it was well noted how many times they kind of had those last second moments to get over the line and get the number of wins that they did. And if you flipped you flipped the results from the last minute of every one of those games, they would have been sub 500. So that, for one, that just speaks to the close margins that is the NFL. But two, just how, luck had been helping them out and was on their side a lot of times previously, that then it just wasn't last season. The injury to Mahomes, as mentioned, is just kind of a nice little, like, well, he still hasn't started a game while being mathematically eliminated from the playoffs in his entire career, technically. And it's like, yes, we all understand that. As you had highlighted, though, realistically, they had a good chance of losing that game, for one, where then he did get hurt. And then once he lost that game the following week, they would have been eliminated and he would no longer have that meaningless stat. That is, kind of, to me, it's even like the Larry Fitzgerald caught a pass in whatever number consecutive games. I'm like, that's kind of, is it a longevity stat? Sure. I mean, but what are we talking about? So, I do find it interesting how, with the Chiefs, mainly on the defensive side of things, they truly, I think they did a phenomenal job, not to try to compliment them too much. I think they did a phenomenal job of understanding value for play and just capitalizing on a lot of things without financially leaning in on stuff, because they understand they can't just give everyone their money. And when you have a guy like McDuffie who deserves everything he got, wanting the bag, you have to move on. And they got absolute capital for him. And then in turn, drafted a nice first round talent in, at corner in Delane. They brought in Kader Kohu, who has some good experience at the nickel position. He's been asked in Miami a lot of times due to injuries to play the boundary, and that's where he struggles a little bit more. But at the nickel spot, he's good. And then, as you had mentioned as well, L'Jarius Sneed comes back now, and that's kind of a known commodity back in house. That if we were to talk about it right now, he's probably their fourth corner, maybe even their fifth, depending on how the depth shakes up. And that seems like a quality individual, especially to the Chiefs, to have as a depth option, because at the last time he wore a Chiefs uniform, he was seen as one of the more higher end corners on the boundary in the entire league. So I think what they did by turning McDuffie and kind of offloading their secondary and reshaping it with other assets that are more controlled from a salary perspective, but still have quality to their game. I think that was a good job by them overall, understanding that they have to pay Patrick Mahomes $500 million, and they're still got Kelsey on the salary, and Rashee Rice is impending, although that salary situation is a fascinating one in its own right, just based on availability and off-field things. So it's just, with all of that going in mind, and then having the money and finances to still go out and get reigning Super Bowl MVP and a quality. And I agree with you 1000%, and I honestly even lean forward. I'm not disrespecting pre-legal issue Kareem Hunt, because he was kind of a rocket out of a cannon situation where it was, everyone remembers that game in New England. I believe it was week 1 or 2, whatever that season was, where you're like, holy shit, who the F is this guy? But overall, I think Kenneth Walker even might be a greater overall talent than he was at that time. So he will bring a dynamic that it feels like Mahomes essentially has just never had in that offense, that Andy Reid should be able to, get his hands on and do everything he can to maximize the two phases that are needed for that offense, for sure. That on paper, if all things go well, I would still believe that you can easily see it trending back up. Where I have caution, though, and why I still lean to that, it does have that trend, is age is undefeated as always. And that is more highlighted with Kelsey. But a ACL injury to come back from, Mahomes is targeting week 1. That ACL injury happened late in the season. You're realistically looking at a year where Mahomes it feels like historically won't even get to 100% until your second half of the season, if not even like, going into the fourth quarter of the season. And I'm talking 100%. And that's assuming recovery continues well through the season if he's playing through it. So that's something where, and it's not a Kyler Murray athleticism that we're dealing with here, but Mahomes does have that, what do you want to call it? Cliche, sneaky athleticism to him that, his mobility is important. And week one, realistically, I wouldn't be surprised if Mahomes is playing, we're talking a 65, 70% Mahomes healthy. And it's, as you play games, you can avoid contact all you want. It's still going to come in the NFL, especially at quarterback, where you are touching the ball every play. And that will just hinder recovery just a little bit. It might not completely halt it, but it's going to hinder or slow it down rather than having him sit and recover faster away from the field of play. So if they're going to go for it week one, and it seems like, he at least is under the mindset of playing week one, I even have questions on what his health will truly be at come when, he visits Orchard Park to play the Bills in this new stadium on Thanksgiving night.
The Chiefs get a lot of credit from you, and I think a lot of people, for how they handled their defensive back situation this offseason, but they have not been flawless in some of these moves. Last offseason, it was trading away Joe Thuney to the Bears, and that ended up being a colossal mistake because the interior of their offensive line for the Chiefs was a weakness all season long, and the Bears ended up having one of the best running games in the entire sport. And then when you look at them drafting, I believe it was Josh Simmons last year in the draft, they got a lot of credit for taking a swing on a guy that had an injury situation. It's like, oh man, if they get him right, that's like a lotto level pick. But sometimes there's a reason why these guys fall. He got on the field and did not overly impress. And, maybe there's a reason why he got picked as late as he did. And, the Chiefs they got Creed Humphrey. He's obviously fantastic, but what's around him is a declining Trey Smith. Wanya Morris did not work out. He's now a former Chief. And, this offensive line is a work in progress, which lends into why Kenneth Walker is so important, because this is not the Chiefs of 5 years ago where you could put me and Luka behind that offensive line and we could probably rip off at least 4 yards of carry, not realistically. But, you could survive with an Isaiah Pacheco or, a 30-plus-year-old Kareem Hunt and still make it work in the run game. No. There's going to have to be some creation done there. And I do think Kenneth Walker is able to do that. You did mention the Chiefs' fifth corner. The sixth corner on the Chiefs had a very notable championship game performance in Arrowhead that led to the Chiefs going to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, he was playing for the other team, our Buffalo Bills, and that name was Kyer Elam, when he is still wondering which way Xavier Worthy is going. So yeah, that's a look at the Chiefs. What's your fear level of the Chiefs this year on a scale of 1 to 10?
1 to 10, I'd probably, it's so hard, right? The elephant in the room is Patrick Mahomes and his health. That's just the bottom line. Assuming it's at what feels accurate or historically accurate or whatever, and him being at that 65, 70%, it does feel like he's going to be playing from week one from all things we're being told. It's hard for me to believe that they're going to hit the ground running. They've already been kind of known as a little bit of a slower starter just because, they rest a lot in the preseason. I'm not trying to make a long-winded thing of this, but I think there's just too many changes and too many question marks with them that, I would probably put it around 6.5 out of 10. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. Andy Reid deserves all the respect in the world. He's one of the best coaches in the league and has been for a very, very long time. If there's anyone that can figure out how to work around this Mahomes injury situation, it is Andy Reid. Like, he'd be one of the guys you'd absolutely want. Reid, McVay, Shanahan, those are the kind of guys you want. These big brains on offense that can just manipulate anything, change complete game plans, do whatever the hell they want. They have 10 answers to one problem. So it's, I believe in Andy Reid to be able to figure it out, but you still need players on the field that can execute that plan. And that's where, you're now married and aging Travis Kelce look, last year, man, we saw one game where he had at least, it feels like 5 drops that were very uncharacteristic. And you can't convince me otherwise that all of a sudden a year later, that's going to go away. I think focus, age, just time is undefeated, as always said on this program. I don't believe that it's magically going to correct itself and he has found the fountain of youth. So I think that is up in the air. He has been known as the safety blanket for Mahomes. And if you were having a guy who's at 70% under center needing something, it'd be a safety blanket. And Travis Kelce feels like, hey, you need to start figuring out Noah Gray or something else in that realm if you want to try to get higher end play there. And Noah Gray's no Travis Kelce even in his prime. So I just, there's a lot of questions there that feel like I don't know how high end they can execute on offense. And then the holes they're filling and things like that. I like a lot of stuff when it comes to asset management they've done on the defensive side, but it's still a lot of turnover that Spagnuolo's got a lot of work on his hands that, again, a well-respected coordinator can do a lot of things, but it's just so much to do, over the course of a season while you're trying to manage things. If losses stack up a little bit early on, you can understand how that can get away from you. So by the time it comes to the Bills where it matters the most, and if they're already a couple wins ahead in the column, 6.5 feels like a good place to be when it comes to threat overall. And realistically, that could drop by the time they play significantly.
If I gave you a superpower and I said, Luka, I'm from the future, I can tell. Sorry about that. I'm in the future. I can tell you the Bills are going to make the playoffs.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you the ability to eliminate one AFC team that guarantees the Bills will not have to play them in January. How many teams would you even consider before you got to Kansas City?
Consider. Okay. One.
I have 2 I'd consider, but I think I'd ultimately be like, nah, get Mahomes and Reed out of my face.
There's one bona fide. I would rather take the Chiefs than them. AFC. Yeah, I'd probably say undoubtedly unquestioned one. And that's the Ravens.
Same.
Yeah, I get the Ravens out of my face, and they have a different head coach and all this stuff. So there could be a lot of differences, but at the same time that you know who Lamar Jackson is and he's coming in healthy, all things considered. He's King Henry's still Derrick Henry. It feels like it's until proven otherwise in that regard. I mean, they have the high end capabilities that it's like, I would really love to just not have to deal with that. I think the Bills could take care of it. Of course. I mean, history has shown us they can, but I think right now, if you were to give me that, I think they would be the only team I for sure would do that for. But I will say this, the fear factor of the Chiefs might be at its absolute lowest right now. I think if we were to get to a point that you have like 2 years ago where it's, let's say it's Chiefs at Bills in this case, or, regardless of location, and we're playing in the AFC Championship game, I'd probably be the most confident I had been going into that playoff matchup of all the years we've had so far. Obviously 2020 was just happy to be there. 21, you felt good after the perfect game, but at the same time, you're like, we're playing the Chiefs in their peak. You understood what you're going into. You just hoped for a good game, and obviously you got an absolute classic that unfortunately you're on the wrong side of. 2023, you felt good because it was finally in your house, but it was still big bad Mahomes, and they were still at the peak of their powers.
I think 2023 to me is just like, God, we can't get anybody healthy. Like we had them, and then it was Terrell Bernard. We had AJ Klein coming in off the couch, trying to cover Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift in the building.
Right, but like overall, the fear factor was still very high with them.
Oh yeah,
right? Like it's shit. Well, I'm not like, you felt okay, but there were the questions on your own end, and it was still them at their best.
Yeah,
and then 2025 AFC Championship, or 2024, sorry. It was one of those right? 24
in 2025 calendar year.
Yeah, right. 2025 calendar year. Felt great going into it, but still it was like, this is still Patrick Mahomes. And you're going into Arrowhead. It's like that X factor is there. And of course we saw it play out the way it is. So if we were to go into it this year, one, I would think that matchup based on, I think the Chiefs will have a slower start than even usual, just due to natural things. That it would most likely, in my opinion, be in the Bills stadium. And then it feels like Josh Allen is still just cruising as more as ever. Hopefully he'd be at, the expected health at that point in the season. And Mahomes at that point would probably be as healthy as he's been, but still, like, the confidence level I would have going into it would be at its absolute highest, because Kelsey's not what he's been. You mentioned the weapon situation. Rashee Rice is really your only dominant threat. Xavier Worthy might be able to get you one big play, it feels like, but he's a toy. And then Kenneth Walker is your biggest circle, X factor. But I'm not, no disrespect to Kenneth Walker, I'm not thinking it's, Derrick Henry running at me. I'm not thinking it's Christian McCaffrey kind of guy going at me. It's not a Bijan Robinson. It's like, no, it's Kenneth Walker, like very, very good. I'll call it middle of the road to good tier 2 running back in this league. Like, you're not tier 1. You're not with the Bijans, the Derrick Henrys, the big boys. You're in the same category to me as like a James Cook, different style, different tech, different things you bring to the table. But overall, it's like you're kind of in that tier 2. Even maybe, I mean, I would take James Cook over Kenneth Walker personally, but you might even be talking about like the first option of tier 3. So I would probably be as most confident as possible going into that.
It's a good question there. I like Kenneth Walker. I like Breece Hall. I like James Cook. That is a really good running back draft class. They all came out of the same draft.
Yeah.
All right. We're not going to spend as much time on all these teams as the Chiefs, but they have been the thorn in the Bills' side. And really, the last 2 Chiefs games were kind of like the start of this disturbing trend where Josh Allen has the ball in his hands with a chance to win it late, and they come up short for whatever reason, whether it's a Diggs drop, Deion Dawkins getting pushed into his lap by Chris Jones, Dalton Kincaid not being able to catch, laying out for a pass for Josh Allen. And then obviously, 4th and inches. And then what happened in Denver last year. We'll get to Denver in a second. Let's knock out the Raiders real quick, though, Luka. This is a fun team, I think. If I were a Raiders fan for the first time in a long time, I think I'd start to be excited.
Yes.
And, I realize you've been suffocated by Patrick Mahomes being the quarterback in your division. And as Bills fans, we can feel that. We sat there through 3 decades of Tom Brady, just like, when is he going to get out of our face? And I do think that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but as the Broncos proved last year, you don't necessarily have to just assume that the division is automatically theirs. You can go out there and take it. I love the hire of Clint Kubiak. If I could be perfectly honest with all of you, I don't know if Luka would agree with this. I would have preferred Clint Kubiak over Joe Brady the day that the Bills hired Joe Brady. I understand why the Bills weren't comfortable waiting for him, though. And they had the number 1 pick. And it's not nothing to me that Tom Brady has stroke in that organization, just because we know how over the top competitive he is. And I don't think that he's going to be part of an ownership group that's just going to be happy to make money. I think Tom Brady has proven that he is driven by championships. And I would want to know that about my ownership group and not just assume that they're just happy they're collecting a paycheck. What I think is most interesting, Luke, about the Raiders from a Bills perspective, though, is the timing of the game. October 18th, because I do think there's a really good chance that the Raiders are going to do the thing that teams do when they draft a quarterback. They're going to start the veteran, and it's going to be Kirk Cousins to start the season. Will he still be the quarterback on October 18th? I would guess no, but I don't think it's a slam dunk that the Bills see Fernando Mendoza.
I think Fernando Mendoza is absolutely starting by that game. I'm going to put this on record. I can see that not being the case when it comes to Kirk Cousins starting week 1. I think Fernando Mendoza is the kind of individual you're going to see with also what we've seen from Kirk Cousins of late. You're going to see Fernando Mendoza, and Kubiak's going to be sitting there being like, I mean, I feel like I'm handcuffing us if I don't put Mendoza under center week 1. It's one of those things where I think as you go through your offseason, as you go through your training camp, you're playing these preseason games, you're seeing what's happening. I think eventually it's going to the pressure or just the understanding. I'm not even going to say that's pressure, because I imagine that the expectation, as you said, is Kirk Cousins, your week 1 starter, just to kind of help Fernando ease into it. But it's going to get to a point, in-house where it just feels as if you're only doing that because it feels like the thing you're supposed to do. But then when you watch the tape, when you understand what's going on at practice day after day, it's like you're only hurting yourselves by not putting Fernando in as early as possible. And on top of it all, what I love about the Raiders and why I agree 1000% that, it feels as if Raider fans should finally start to feel light at the end of the tunnel, be excited about the season. You're not going to get probably the number of wins you would like to see to truly be excited, but there's going to be promise. And you saw this past offseason with the Raiders, they splashed cash. They got the best center in free agency in Tyler Linderbaum, a guy I am over the moon in love with at the center position. Him not being a Raven is music to my ears. That should help single-handedly for Ashton Genty and then whoever is under center at that point, and being Fernando eventually. You have, the best receiving tight end in the sport now at this point when it comes to Brock Bowers. Hopefully he's full health. I think Jalen Naylor coming in is a sneaky move to have at the slot position. I think he would show things when he was in Minnesota that's a nice little piece. They lack severely at the boundary spots, but that will come in time. But what I really find interesting is the thing that was always the heel with the Raiders, no matter what, was the defense just not having anything with Max Crosby. I do like what they did in kind of rebuilding the Raiders defense. Eric Stokes was brought in. Quay Walker was brought in. Nakobe Dean was brought in. These are all high-end guys. Ironically enough, those are all Georgia Bulldogs. I'm almost positive of that.
That's 100% true. I didn't put that together though.
Yeah, and I think Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean were partners essentially when they were at Georgia, dominating on defensive side of stuff. So there's a familiarity for
Kwity too. That's not nothing to me. Kwity, I think he was a fish out of water in Indy in their scheme.
Yeah, Kwity Paye is another good one. And Jeremy Chin at the safety position. Mm-hmm. I think what they did on the defensive side is going to finally it's going to keep them in games. If you're a Raiders fan, if you are watching the Raiders, and this is something even in the Bills lens that to pay attention to, they have just enough to be spicy, and they have just enough to keep you in games where you'd feel like by first half, maybe you were in it by 2 scores, but as the third quarter is rolling through, now you're down 17, 21, 24, whatever, and the game's getting away, and you can kind of move that one to the side and watch whatever the most entertaining game at the 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock slate is. And I think this team is built in a fashion, especially once Fernando's in, that, they have an okay enough offensive line with Colton Miller and Linderbaum. You have Ashton Genty, you have Brock Bowers, you have Jalen Naylor at the slot, most likely. The defense seems like it's enough that can hopefully bend, not break Taron Johnson and his old ass out there at nickel. They should be spicy enough to keep it entertaining, maybe even be up, surprisingly on some teams in the second half at some point, where then a Bills or a Chiefs or a whoever has to kind of kick it into next gear to eventually get that win. But I think the Raiders are one of those teams that they still have a year or two to go. They need to continue to build this thing. They're lacking still at the corner position. They're eventually going to have to find something to replace Taron Johnson as well. He's a Band-Aid for now. The boundary receiver position I mentioned already. The offensive line still needs to be built more. Linderbaum and Colton Miller are only 2 noteworthy pieces there. Powers Johnson at guard is meh, but it's something that you can see the upward trend. And if you are a Raiders fan, or if you're anyone that's hoping for anything other than Chiefs Broncos out there in the AFC West, the Raiders might be the one that feels a little bit more spicy and interesting than, say, a divisional opponent there elsewhere that I didn't name in that conversation.
Well, one other thing that's tricky about that Raiders game is going to be something Luka brings up every time the Bills go down to Miami. And if you want to hear Luka talk about that, just turn on our post-game show from when the Bills got throttled in Miami this year. He calls it the Miami flu. The Raiders play in Vegas. You want to talk about a city that can give you a flu. There's a lot to be distracted by, especially when you think you're going down there and playing an inferior team. That's going to test, one, Joe Brady. Because I know Sean McDermott had the stinker in Miami last year, but I would say for the most part, he had his teams buttoned up in those situations where they generally took care of business. And then otherwise, like Luka mentioned, they have some high-end talent. They get a lead on you in the second half. They have Max Crosby and Kwity Paye to be able to pin their ears back. Ashton Genty, who in year 2 with, no offense, Pete Carroll, Super Bowl winning coach, but much better offensive system.
Yeah.
I think a underrated offensive line now led by Linderbaum. That's going to be a tough team to come back on with the way they can run the ball. It'll all really depend on how Mendoza does hitting the ground running. Luka, the team you didn't want to mention, the Chargers, are getting a lot of credit right now. And it's interesting because they've done nothing. And a lot of the credit is I think warranted. Yeah, like, yes, they are getting Joe Alt back and Rashawn Slater back. That was their biggest weakness last year. And if you live in an imaginary world where the Chargers went out and signed Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, that'd be like, whoa, they fixed their offensive line, but they didn't get anybody back. In a lot of ways, it's like, oh, they're also going to get Omari and Hampton back. Yes, but he was there last year. He didn't do great, and he got hurt. I am very intrigued by the Mike McDaniel addition. I think the world of Mike McDaniel as an offensive play caller, and I do think that if Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater are healthy, at least for the majority of the season, you give Mike McDaniel that offensive line, I think it has a chance to really pop. I think the Chargers offense has a chance to be fantastic. I am not afraid of the Chargers, and we can go through their roster if you want to. It's very similar to last year, but I couldn't love the spot more for the Bills, where you're looking at a situation where I believe the Bills are coming off a long rest, right? That's week 3. So they're playing them after having the Lions in town and having basically a 10-day break instead of a 7-day break.
Yeah, late
and the
September.
Chargers are coming west to east, and that game is at 1:00. I mean, that is a layup of not a layup game because I respect the Chargers, but that is a layup of spots. That's where you would want a team like the Chargers to be on your schedule early in September, and get that jet lag going. That game doesn't scare me as much as I do think where the Chargers could be more dangerous as the season goes on if they don't do what Lucas says they always do. And I used to roll my eyes at it and be like, okay, you're not really adding analysis here. And now, like year 4 of the podcast, I'm like, oh my God, they're doing it again. The Chargers always Charger. Take the floor, Luka.
That's what they do, man. Look, we know we have an acquaintance that is a big Chargers fan. And it's like, I'm not the biggest like energy, vibes, whatever. I mean, I joke about it sometimes. I do talk about it sometimes. I think in certain regards that stuff matters, or at least should be factored into. And when even your Charger diehards are kind of waiting for the butt, waiting for the hammer to drop, whatever it is, Chargers gonna Charger, whether it's Chargers kicker or injury bug, or God forbid they make the playoffs and inevitably lose in that first appearance of it. It's snake bitten at its finest. It's you can throw out the facts and the stats and all that stuff. It does not matter. It's the microcosm of it all is your Justin Herbert lover haters, right? Your lovers understand what you physically see on the field, what your eyes are telling you see. You're like, this guy has all the tools and potential to be an absolute premier high-end talent at the quarterback position. But in any time, and this is where the haters come in, at any time where he needs to step up and make those plays, and it's not just some throwaway game in Rochester. No, I'm making a joke there. It's not just some random week 4 Monday night game against the Texans or whatever the situation is. We're talking a meaningful game with division priority at whatever you want to call it, playoffs, regardless, something of meaning. He shits down his leg. Or he, just like something goes wrong. And it's just because Justin Herbert is not even capable enough of overcoming the inevitable Chargers gonna Charger. And it's not an analysis here. It is truly a joke and a meme of a statement. But until proven otherwise, there's no reason to analyze anything more with the Chargers. I love Joe Alt through the moon. I love Rashawn Slater. I will say this, I'm not a huge fan of their interior 3. I mean, the meme that is, ironically enough, Cole Strange is now a Charger. That's interesting. I mean, Khalil Mack, age is undefeated, but also at the same time, he still keeps churning away results and sack numbers. So It is what it is, but their secondary is not anything I'm over the moon about other than Derwin James, and Derwin James feels like he's going to inevitably get that Chargers injury that's just going to hold him back a little bit. It's one of those things. I just don't see enough high-end stuff here that's really turned things over that is going to get them over the line. Like, the Chargers are the classic low floor, low ceiling to me, where it's like, hey, their ceiling is a wild card team in the AFC that flames out in the wild card. Like, that is the, until I see anything otherwise, I would bet the mortgage on it. Like, you can bring in a new offensive coordinator. You can try to spice stuff up. I guarantee Mike, he's going to look at this stuff and he's going to be like, I don't have 4.2 speed everywhere. So I need to completely reshift my focus and understanding, which he's fully capable of. He's been around the league for a long time. And it's not like he's had the Miami speed team everywhere he's gone. But, Omarion Hampton, I like the player. Love is a stretch, but I like him. But it's not like he did anything last year that proves me that I think he'll take another step forward. It's another thing I always preach in hockey and football, everything. The assumption that players develop and take steps forward is the most misguided thing I think a lot of fans of sports and leagues have. Athletes don't just magically always progress forward because they had another year in the league. That's not, you should never assume that. Never, ever. Keon Coleman is a prime example of one of the thousands of players that it's like, you see flashes, you see opportunities as a rookie. You're like, if this guy can just keep progressing forward, and then you see year two and you're like, it's still Keon Coleman. Like, this guy's still the same guy. And it's, there's a little bit of a Sabres lens to that one that obviously I'm not going to get into, but it's like, you can't always assume that a player will just take the next step forward and progress. It's like, sometimes players, believe it or not, are just exactly who they are. And you just work around it if you want to, or you move on and find something else if it doesn't fit your need. So Omarion Hampton, to me, feels like one of those prime examples that it's like, I saw something interesting out of him last year, and that just might be who he is. Let's see if he progresses better. He's going to have elite tackle play. Hopefully injuries are fine. That will help him because he didn't have that last year. Ladd McConkey is still an absolute dog in the slot, but overall you can throw all those thoughts out the window in the classic thing that should just be labeled on all Chargers, previews, whatever is, until proven otherwise, Chargers going to Charger. Like, they do the impossible historically. They have number one offenses and defenses that still can't win playoff games or can't win Super Bowl, like can't even make the playoffs. Like, they do the impossible. That is what the Chargers do, people. So just for another year and another time, believe it to be what it is.
I think Justin Herbert is who Josh Allen haters think Josh Allen is. When you look at Josh Allen's playoff stats and they're like, Josh Allen always chokes in the playoffs. It's like, well, not really. He's actually left the field quite a few times with the lead and defenses let him down. Justin Herbert has played in 3 playoff games. He has a record of 0-3. He has 2 touchdowns, 5 turnovers. And in the last 2 playoff games, they've scored a combined 15 points. I like Justin Herbert. I think he is an uber talented player. The things he can do as a quarterback always appeal to me from a scouting perspective. That's why I was Team Herbert. I got to stop kicking this thing. Team Herbert over Team Tua when that draft came around. And it's why I still, believe he has the ability to be one of the elite guys in the sport. I still believe that. But when you get to the money games, and I get it, he's played the Texans, who have made Josh Allen look terrible. He's played the Patriots, who, on any given day when they have their secondary right, can make you look bad. You got to have your franchise quarterback step up. Our guy went to Denver, who we're going to talk about in a second, one of the best defenses in the sport, with practice squad receivers, and put up 30 points. You need your star quarterback to be stars in those games, and Justin Herbert, unfortunately, has not been. So this is a fascinating season for him. I'm sure it doesn't sit well for Chargers fans that the Chiefs didn't win the division and it wasn't the Chargers that took advantage of it. And I think it's also probably a big year for Harbaugh, because when they brought him in, I think they expected more than just a couple of fizzle out playoff losses. I think they expected him to steady the ship. And so far, they've just been charging. All right, Luka, let's talk about the team that did in the Bills season last year, the Denver Broncos. Every offseason, I get a point to like July, and I go back and watch the Bills games from the last year. One, I like to go back and remind myself of things that happened in the games. Like, for example, I went back and watched the Bills Patriots game where the Bills came back and won. And, you know, I don't think that was pass interference against Khalil Shakir. It looked like the Patriots actually intercepted the ball. But also, like, holy hell, what a comeback that was for the Bills. I go back and watch that Denver game. And I didn't know if I could watch it till the end, but I did. Because I still can't watch the end of 13 seconds. I just can't. It is incredible how badly the Bills should have blown them out of the stadium. How much better of a team the Bills were. And when you go back and watch that game, for me, it almost clicked in my head. That's why Sean McDermott got fired. Look at all the stupid mistakes this team made. Did Sean McDermott jump off sides on the Broncos' first drive of the game on a play they fumbled and the Bills recovered it? No, that was Larry Ogunjobi. Did Sean McDermott underthrow a wide open Curtis Samuel? No, that was Josh Allen. Did Sean McDermott fumble the ball right before half when they should have been kneeling on it because they had no timeouts and they were 80 yards away and there was 10 seconds left? No, that was Josh Allen. But this was the things of Sean McDermott teams when you got to the money games, when you're going against Andy Reid, when you're going against Belichick, when you're going against the best of the best. You can't lose a game because of poor decisions. And Sean McDermott, for as much as I loved him as the Bills coach, they just didn't get that edge from their head coach. And I would argue they got lucky that it didn't bite them in the ass against Jacksonville, because when you go back and watch that, the same silly mistakes, a fumble on a kickoff. You had a situation at the end of the game where when you go back and watch it, it does kind of become mind-boggling how they just let Josh Allen score with a minute left instead of really playing that smart, knowing how automatic of a play that was. And I get where Terry Pagula was coming from because there were so many mistakes in that game. I named a couple. I put a tweet out about a week ago from our podcast account, laying out about 10 of them just in the first half. It was nauseating, and it still came down to a Brandon Cooks. Was it a catch or was it an interception? I don't care. Make the catch. The Bills had 25,000 attempts to win that game before then. That's a long way of saying not overly impressed with the Broncos. Just not. Bo Nix, I think he's a fun quarterback. If I were a fan of the Broncos, I'd be excited, not because necessarily of Bo Nix, but because of what that team they built around him. I really believe in the head coach, like really, really believe in the head coach. And I think Bo Nix is good enough, like to be that Jeff Garcia, to be that Baker Mayfield, where when the rest of it's really good, he can carry a good team. I don't think he can Josh Allen it and like put a backpack on and just carry everybody. I think he can drive a good car though. But no, if you told me the Bills were going to wind up right back in Mile High this offseason, I'd say bring it on. And I'd feel good about their chances. I know they brought in Jalen Waddle. You and I are both really big Cortland Sutton fans. I know you and I share the same opinion about Sean Payton as far as his mind for the game and what kind of head coach he is. Obviously, Joe Brady came from the Sean Payton tree. But in general, Luka, I respect their roster. I think they might have the best offensive line in the sport, quite honestly. But I just wouldn't fear him because unlike the Ravens, who you mentioned, unlike the Chiefs, who we already talked about, until further notice, they don't have Superman at quarterback. And that is the scariest thing because that is the one thing that the Bills have over 95% of the teams that are going to be in their way is no matter what happens to the rest of your roster, we have a Superman at quarterback and you don't. And I don't think the Broncos are ever going to get that out of Bo Nix.
I mean, that's the funny part is you mentioned a name even saying that Bo Nix is like this or whatever. If they even had Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, I think it was a little disrespectful what you said about Baker Mayfield. If they had Baker Mayfield, I'd be like, oh shit. With this team, you just literally do a like for like swap. I'd be like, oh, this is a problem. Because Baker is even the kind of guy that
That's
has
fair.
those,
Baker's
those
better than
untangible things where it's like he can do it. He can Baker can pull stuff. I mean, we're not trying to talk Buccaneers Baker here, but I think the prototypical Baker in my head, and I'm the biggest Baker fan in the world, it feels like, that's not a Buccaneers fan. I think about that Monday night game against the Texans where it was 4th and 16 or whatever, and he takes off running, and you're like, what the hell are you doing? And he sheds 2 tackles, dives forward, gets up, shrugs it off, and keeps the drive going, and ends up leading them to a game-winning drive at that moment in time. Like, that is Baker Mayfield's not a top 5, 7, 8 running quarterback in this league. Like, and it's 4th and long, and all of a sudden he's taking off. In no world should he be picking that up, but there's certain things about a quarterback like that quite literally will them to get that first down. He is that guy, and that right there is why I love him so much. So if you put Baker Mayfield in this team, this would probably be my number 1 scariest AFC team, to be quite honest. But that, now to bring it to the Broncos, that is quite literally why I do not fear the Broncos. Bo Nix, to me, is my Fugazi of the position candidate for the entire league. Bo Nix, I think, is someone that feels as if you could still rate him as a top 10 quarterback, and I think you're massively overrating him. Bo Nix, he can do things, but it all needs to just work perfectly from a coaching perspective, and you still also need to have all this high-end stuff. And I will say, on top of it all, you still need to have 2 solid phases of the game. And as great as that offensive line is, and I think it's very respectable for what you're saying, that it could be the best, being that I don't have them all in front of me, I'm not going to just outright say it, but I wouldn't bat an eye if that was the case, because, I mean, Bowles, McGlinchey, Manners, like all of them, like, they're elite at their positions. So, or at least top notch. McGlinchey might be a stretch to be elite, but he's still a very, very, very higher end.
And then the McDaniel aspect too.
And then the McDaniel on top. It's just all of these things. So, when you have an RJ Harvey paired up in the backfield with a Bo Nix, I think that's your true like letdown. If you had anyone that would be what I would consider a top 20 running back in this league.
Bucky Irving. Let's just bring another Buck into it.
Yeah, Bucky Irving. Someone like that who seems even a downward trend, but still has that high-end capability to him. Then all of a sudden we're talking, you have 2 true phases that are scary. Jalen Waddle being brought in is a great addition, but I don't think that gets them over the hump where you can just ignore the run game in their respect, because Bo Nix dropping back 50 times a game, bring it on. I welcome you to think you can win games doing that, because I just don't think that's a means for success. Bo Nix will screw it up. I mean, it's just, that's what it feels like. You saw Bo Nix not be able to win a game in Indianapolis against Daniel Jones in that defense, which solid defense, not elite, but solid defense in Indy. That those games happened last season. That in that same season we saw then him beat the Bills at home, but then also, break his foot or whatever. I don't even remember what his injury was, but do something afterwards that he couldn't play in the AFC Championship game. It's like Bo Nix, in my opinion, did not win that game. I don't think he's even a top 3 reason of why the Broncos won that game. And I just don't see where Bo Nix going into this year is a top 15 quarterback candidate to me. And it's like, he's going to, again, I'm not assuming he's going to progress any further. He feels like the perfect candidate of, he hit the NFL at his ceiling, and he's just going to maintain that until age eventually regresses him. That's what Bo Nix feels like. He was NFL ready. He came in. The Broncos did a great job building something around him to try to maximize that. But inevitably, he's not going to, as you said, put on the cape, win you games, especially in the money games, and make it happen. And then the Broncos overall as a team, flipping it to the defensive side, still a very good defensive team, but it's not what it was 2 years ago. Last year, it's still a solid defense. It's just, I would say it's not as well-rounded as it once was. And therefore, there will be opportunities for your higher end quarterbacks and your higher end offenses to eventually get them and do what they can. And for all intents and purposes, there were so many misses for the Bills and in the Bills lens in that playoff game. And yet they still put up, 30 points. Like the fear factor with the Broncos feels as fake as morning fog that dissipates as soon as the sun rises. It's just, it goes away when you finally see the light and understand it's like, no, this is an average to above average team, because where it matters the most, they don't quite have the notch that's needed like the rest of the big boys. You don't have 17, you don't have 15, you don't have 8. Like, you don't have these guys that truly bring you over the line. You don't even have a Baker Mayfield who can will you over the line with everything you've built around him. You still have Bo Nix. You don't have that high-end halfback next to him. So you're kind of one-dimensional-ish, and your elite coaching and play calling there is only going to get you so far in the end.
Darnell Savage comes in for Cam Lewis, who's playing out of his mind, for one play, and Sean Payton goes right after him for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Dane Jackson comes in for Tre'Davious White, who misses one play, and Sean Payton goes right after him with Marvin Mims for a touchdown. Why Sean McDermott left both those guys on an island, your guess is as good as mine. You can ask him. He has a little bit of time on his hands these days. All right. Well, Luka, that is a look at the AFC West. We have one more episode to go. We're going to group together. Is that correct? Yeah. No, we still have to do we're going to group together the rest of the opponents, which is the NFC North. Let's see if I can do this off the top of my head. Let's see how impressive I am here. The NFC North, and then the Houston Texans, the LA Rams, and the Baltimore Ravens.
You even did it in order of the schedule.
Boom. Happy accident. All right. Well, for Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We hope you all are having a wonderful summer, and football season is right around the corner, and we will talk to you next time on Bills Chat.